All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall with Murder by the Book. So excited for tonight's event. But before we get started, we'll give everybody a couple of seconds to come find us through Facebook or YouTube and kind of wander our way. So again, I'm John McDougall. I am the event coordinator at Murder by the Book. As you can see, I am actually not in the bookstore. I am at my home at the moment. And like I said, I'm so excited for tonight's event. Before we get started, I wanted to mention that if you guys are in the Houston area, the store is open for browsing. We made it through the storm okay. No water damage, no pipes, anything like that. We've been open since Halloween for people to come in and browse. So if you want to come in, definitely come visit us. We've got a 6-person limit at the store at the moment. So we just say if you pull up and the parking lot's full, maybe just poke your head in and we'll let you know where we're at capacity-wise. You'll be able to come in, or we might ask you to wait a few minutes. We know that not everybody is getting out and about in the world. So we are, of course, still doing curbside pickup. We're still doing phone orders, mail orders, email orders. So you can reach us all of the other ways as well. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up. Tomorrow night, McKenna will be chatting with Charlene Harris and Tony Kellner. That one's going to start at 6:30 instead of our usual 7 Central. And then I'll be chatting with Joe Ide tomorrow at 8 o'clock. We also have our Sisters in Crime Houston chapter will have their meeting on Sunday at 2. So if you want some more information about that, you can visit the store's website. If you guys are not familiar, we did launch a recent, we call it Murder by the Box gift subscription. So we've got 3 different options. Definitely check that out on the website too. So lots of cool stuff coming up. We're also working on a next batch of our Murder by the Book Recommends series, which we'll be doing from our homes. So keep an eye out for that. That should be mid-March. Like I said, tonight we're so excited to be chatting with Russ Thomas, who's going to be interviewed by Julia Spencer-Fleming. Personally, I'm so excited for this because the first book in Russ's series, Fire Watching, and Julia's Hid from Our Eyes were my 2 favorite mysteries of last year. So I'm so excited to hear them to chat. So I'm going to get them brought out in just a second. We're going to start with Julia. If you guys are unfamiliar, Julia Spencer-Fleming is the New York Times bestselling author of One Was a Soldier, and an Agatha, Anthony, Dilys, Barry, Macavity, and Gumshoe Award winner. She studied acting and history in Ithaca College and received her JD at the University of Maine School of Law. Her books have been shortlisted for the Edgar, Nero Wolfe, Romantic Times Awards, and she lives in a 190-year-old farmhouse in southern Maine. So we're going to bring her in. How are you tonight, Julia?
I'm good, and I'm thinking I need to update my biography because my house is now 200 years old.
So I was looking before we got started tonight. So we got to chat with you last year when Hid From Our Eyes came out, and you were the 3rd virtual event that we did. Like, I feel like I'm such an old pro at this now. When we were doing those early ones, like I was using like our shoe caddy, like sitting in the corner back there, and I actually have like a ring light in my own laptop to do this now. So it feels like it's been a lifetime since we've done this.
Yeah, everybody's gotten the lighting and the things down, but it was on the fly because my last book, Hid From Our Eyes, came out in April, and all of those in-store events were just canceling in real time, and we were kind of like, what are we going to do? But you know what? I feel that in some ways the pandemic has been a boon for book lovers, because I just feel that a lot of people, they're at home and they're reading books. I feel I have read more books this past year than I normally do, and normally I read a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's been really nice to be able to do stuff like this, and especially with Russ being in the UK and you being in Maine, to be able to bring people together. We wouldn't necessarily be able to do some of these pairings in the store. So as I mentioned, Russ Thomas's first book, Fire Watching, came out last year. His new book, Night Hawking, has just come out. He grew up in the 80s reading anything he could get his hands on, writing stories, watching television, and playing video games. In short, anything that avoided the great outdoors. After a few proper jobs, he discovered the joys of bookselling, where he could talk to people about books all day. Now a full-time writer, he also teaches creative writing classes and mentors new authors. Also wanted to mention Fire Watching ended up being our 14th best-selling hardcover of 2020. So we're so excited to have him here tonight. I'm going to bring him onto the screen. How are you tonight, Russ?
Oh, hi. I'm very well, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here in spirit, if not in person.
I know. I'm so bummed. So we were so lucky to be able to have you at the store last year with John McMahon, and we had a really great joint event, which also seems like it was a lifetime ago. That was like maybe a week or 2 before like everything really started to kind of get crazy and shut down here. So I'm so glad that we were actually still be able to do this virtually.
that was pretty much the last thing I did, I think. I was it was that tour, and then I got home, and in fact, on the flight on the way home, someone had coronavirus, and all the people started putting masks on the plane, and that was the first time I thought, oh, this is pretty serious, isn't it? This isn't going to go away anytime soon. I'm very jealous of you, Julia, because my apartment's only just over 100 years old, so you beat me on that by double.
I think generally speaking, when it comes to English housing stock, I'm still in a newbie house. So, you know.
So if you guys are watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you have questions for Julia or for Russ, please post those in the comments. We were going to leave some time at the end for some audience Q&A. So please definitely leave some time for those. I am going to pop away and let Julia and Russ chat for a little bit. You guys have fun, and I will see you in just a little while.
Oh, finally, we're alone together. So, first off, I'm really glad that we've had a chance to do this. I had not been introduced to your series, and when I got the email saying, would you be interested in reading this kind of gritty, modern police procedural with a lot of like the personal business, and the protagonists are an out gay man and Muslim, I'm going to guess Mina is. I thought, woman, I'm like, yes, please. So the first question that I really wanted to ask you, because I faced this so many times myself with my sophomore book, which is, what was the experience like writing Nighthawkers for you? Your first book came out and it made a big splash. You got a fabulous blurb from Lee Child. It was starred in Publishers Weekly and all sorts of review things. It made best of the year lists. That is a lot of pressure when you were trying to follow up with the second book in a series.
Yeah, really? I didn't feel it. That's not true. Yeah, it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Because also Firewatching, I wrote over the course of about 10 years, kind of on and off, and it had so many different drafts, and I put it away in a drawer for a year or two, and then went back to it, and so I'd worked on it so long to try and get it right, and then all of a sudden I had to deliver book 2 it was about 18 months, which is actually quite a long time for a writer, but it didn't seem like a long time for me. It felt like a hell of a lot of pressure. But having said that, I had some advantages. So as I'm sure you know, I already had the characters who I knew, and that does save a lot of time. I knew it had to be a book that followed the same rough sort of pattern as the first book and the same structure, or I wanted it to be like that, to have the same elements. So it was a case of a lot of the work was already done, which was helpful. But I didn't really know if it was any good. I suppose that's
the scary thing, isn't it? Yeah, you get these great reviews, and then you have to write the second book, and you're thinking, what did I do the first time? What was it that was so good? And you sort of have to do it again without knowing exactly what you did.
And does that get easier when you're on book 9?
No, not really.
I was afraid you might say that.
I find that now, having delivered 9 books and working on the 10th, I don't worry so much about the little details. I kind of let myself flow too much, because then my editor has to cut out lots of things. But the process is always the same. There's always, what is this book going to be about? And then there's you probably experience this too, right? You're writing and it's either the greatest freaking thing ever written in the English language, or it's complete, to use a Britishism, shite, and nobody should ever see this, and you're going to have to go back to doing your job that you had before you were an author.
Yeah, I tell this to my students quite a lot, that often the best advice I can give is, whenever you've written something, it's always in your head the best thing you've ever written or the worst, and neither of those things is ever true. You kind of have to put it away and then go back to it, and then you find what's good and what's bad about it, don't you? So yeah, that's good advice. But I did manage it, and people seem to be liking it so far, those that have read it.
Yeah,
so,
I have to say, I first off, I should say I love the book. Here, I'll like see. Yeah. Always show the book cover. Always show the book cover. And one thing that really impressed me, strictly as a fairly experienced crime fiction writer now, was I had no idea who done it, and I kept switching my theory as I went through the book, which frankly impresses me a lot, because it takes a lot to confuse me and make. So I was genuinely surprised, and we won't say anything, obviously, about that for the audience. But I thought that was an impressive feat.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll take that. That's great coming from you.
Take the W. So I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned the fact that you teach writing, and I know that you have been a bookseller. I don't know if you are still working doing that, but I'm curious as to sort of what order those things, bookseller, writing teacher, and author, and they interlock, but how?
Well, I only ever taught part-time and sort of privately, so not in an institution or anything like that. And so that I kind of did that. Well, I've been in bookselling I have now left, but I was in bookselling for years. My first ever job in a bookstore was when I was 18. I've done it for bits and periods of my life, and then the most recent stint was probably about 15 years. But during that time, I decided to take my writing a bit more seriously. So I'd been writing on and off over the years, and I did a course, an MA in writing, and I thought, if I'm ever going to make this work, I need to really apply myself to it fully. And so at that point, I quit my job. It was quite a big decision, because I didn't have a huge amount of money, but I had a little bit saved that I knew would see me through a year at least. So I quit my job and then started teaching a bit more, doing sort of evening classes with people and Saturday weekends and things like that. But I never really made much money from the teaching. But what was great about it was you learn so much by teaching, and you see all those things you tell people to do. You suddenly go, oh yeah, that's what I need to do, isn't it? I forgot. I've totally forgotten that bit. And it's always great to be reminded of those techniques and things. And then after about a year, my money ran out, and so I had to go back to bookselling for a while. But I think I learned a lot in that time, and I carried on the teaching just part-time and at weekends and things.
Yeah, I think that teaching, I've done seminars, and I've taught a couple times at there's a Maine program called Stone Coast that is strictly focused on, largely focused on genre writing, and I've taught there a few summers. I find it enormously helpful, because it forces you to really think in a conscious way about what it is you do. I feel like a lot of what we do is instinctual. You're writing a scene and like, this works or that doesn't work, or you write it and then you look at it the next day and you think, but when you teach, you really have to think about, because you have to explain it. Why does this work? Why does that not work? What do you do to fix it or make it better?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been good at English. It was my favorite subject at school, and So it came quite naturally to me, spelling and grammar and things like that. But it's not until you try and teach it to someone else that you start thinking about it in that way, isn't it? And thinking, is this right? I don't know. And yeah, so sometimes
Yeah.
I work myself into knots about whether a sentence is correct or not.
I just feel my way around that, and then I hope my editor is going to tell me what it, my mother was an English teacher, so I think she drilled it into me so early I didn't have to think about it. So I saw, now I'm going to have to put on my glasses to read this note that I made. So I was reading some interviews that you had done from last year when Firewatching was out, and here's something that you said and that I really wanted to explore, which was you were talking about the process of writing for 10 years and said, I realized I was writing a police procedural. And that really struck a bell with me, because when I started writing, I was writing science fiction. And I wrote half of an entire science fiction novel. And in science fiction, it was very, very derivative, very, I was regurgitating all my favorite authors, as new writers often do. But what I was really writing was a mystery. It was a murder mystery. And I hadn't even realized it until somebody pointed that out, when a person in my writing group. And then I thought, oh, maybe I ought to actually write a mystery. So I felt very simpatico with the idea that you just sort of discovered that you were writing a police procedure. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I just fell into it. It's interesting you say that, because I also started writing science fiction, and my first ever book, which will never see the light of day, was a big epic. I think it was going to be 12 volumes. I'd worked out it was, and a big space saga. And I found it recently in a drawer and I started reading it. Thought, I wonder if there's anything here I can make into something, and then realized it's actually just Star Wars. And obviously, as a 14, 15-year-old boy, that's what I was. So I just kind of regurgitated Star Wars on the page. But yeah, no, I started Firewatching when I was doing my MA, and it was, I had grand ideas about it being some kind of, I don't know, big literary piece, and not that I'm snobby about genre fiction at all, because I love genre fiction and I've always read it. But I think, I don't know, maybe something about doing an MA, you kind of want to impress the tutors and make out doing something like just a story about people. And it was my tutor at the time said, well, you've got great characters here and I like your writing, but what's the plot? What's going to happen? And I had no idea. I'd just completely forgotten that part of it. So I thought,
sorry, I'm sitting in front of the computer, which means I must be here to pet her. I'm sorry. So your tutor said, what's the plot?
Yeah. So I just threw a body in, because I thought, well, that's a story there, isn't it? You've got a mystery, and it's probably not coincidental, because I'd been reading mysteries and crime thrillers for years. So that's how I kind of fell into that. I then decided I didn't want it to be a police procedural story, because that would mean doing lots of research, and I just was lazy and didn't want to do it. But at some point, I realized that's what I was writing, and as soon as I made that connection, it leapt forward. I stopped struggling against it and trying to turn it into something it wasn't, and that made a huge difference. And knowing what you're writing is quite it's a difficult thing when you first start out, I think, to kind of to know what it is.
I think it can be. I'm a big believer in the work, or the genre, maybe choosing the writer. I just know so many people. I know folks who've started out writing literary fiction that became, crime fiction, romance that became crime fiction that became comical novels. I feel like you start out, and whatever it is, the combination of influences and interests and your own innate ability, maybe the muses. I feel like people you're kind of given the row to hoe. And
yeah, and these things don't have to be separate either, do they? You can write a science fiction mystery or a romantic thriller, or but
or
I think
literary crime fiction.
exactly. But you also, I think, as a writer, if you're going to be serious about writing and want to try and sell it at some point, you need to think about where does it go on the shelf in the bookshop, don't you? And I think once you've figured that out, it really helps channel your kind of where you're going. But yeah, that's interesting. I like that idea that crime chose me.
The life of crime wanted you, Russ.
Yeah.
So, I have to say, I also identify with I didn't want it to be a police procedural. One of the reasons that I started out my series very much in the amateur sleuth area, and they become steadily more procedural as I've gone along. And I've had a couple of novels that are very much police procedural, but it was the same reason. I thought, oh God, I'm just going to have to do so much research and learn things and not have to get things wrong. So I sort of wanted to duck it. So what sort of research did you wind up doing in order to get the details right? Because this is the sort of thing, as we both know, that if you don't get the details right, you will hear about it from readers.
Yeah, it's the thing that probably scares me the most as well about sort of feedback. I don't mind if you don't enjoy my writing or don't like the book, but if you point out I've made an error, I'm going to be mortified. I did speak to a detective inspector who was a friend of my ex-partner, well, a family member of my ex-partner. And he did courses for writers in sort of writing about the police, and I went on one of those. So that was fabulous, and I learned so much and packed it all into the book, and then ended up stripping most of it back out again. It was just too much info. And I also spoke to another friend who was a police constable, because I wanted to see things from the sort of lower rank side and just what a day would the office would be for a police officer. So that was really helpful. She was great. Other than that, I guess just research online. I did for fire watching. Obviously, there was quite a lot of research I had to do into arson and the fires from history. I've always been quite interested in fires and things like that, so I knew some of the stories, and that was good. Night hawking was a bit less research. I did sort of delve into some books on metal detecting, but not a great deal, because that's kind of wasn't as important. I had to do quite a lot of research into the treasure, the finding of treasure, and right. How that stuff like that. But yeah, I just hope I've got away with it. And I also think that as much as it is important to get things right as much as possible, I don't try not to let the research get in the way of telling the story. And if I do need to change something, I'll change it. And
yeah, I think that's important. Someone told me, or I heard someone say, and I wish I could remember who to properly credit it, but talking about writing, said that our job is not to completely put real life on the page. It's to put a verisimilitude of life that's believable to the reader, but also serves the story. And I agree with that. And the thing with research, of course, is that you do so much of it, and then, as you said, you have to whack some of it out, because you're not writing a book about how to do an investigation. You're writing about people who
exactly
happen to be investigating.
I mean, real police investigations can involve hundreds of people, and you don't have room in a novel to fit all that in. So there are shortcuts you have to take. I'm sure if you're a police officer reading my books, you'd be horrified, but I'm not just writing for police officers. So.
Yeah. Fortunately, they're a small enough, member of the audience, so they can't get on us.
They
so
already know their job.
One of the things that I really, really enjoyed was actually thinking of, hundreds of police officers versus the small group, is this really interesting collection of people that you've put together. I love the fact that in Nighthawking you see very much the individuals who are doing this, often difficult and demanding job with so many different motivations. There's and I'm going to forget what her actual title is, but Diane's title, which is superintendent.
She's detective chief inspector.
So where she is trying to jostle manage the budget and manage the personnel. The fact that everyone is dealing with not enough money and not enough people, and that actually affects the investigation and what people are able to work on and what they're able to do. Near the very beginning, there's this great spot, and I thought, wow, where we'd say medical examiner, says, well, we can do these other tests, but you have to pay for it. And Mina Rabini thinks, I don't know if they're going to be able to pay for it. So I'm not sure if I've got a question. I guess I'm tossing this out to you because I really like the fact that, and then you've got, people who are very ambitious. You've got people who are very lazy. And they're all these individual personalities that are put into this box, which is a police station, as it were, the job, and then shaken up. And then you see what happens. And now you're going to have to come up with something to say, because I have no question with that. I just really, really enjoyed it as a reader and as a writer.
Yeah. What interests me is people, and that's what I'm writing about, really. As I say, I fell into the police stuff, and I love the police stuff. I love the mystery and the unpicking of the mystery and so on. But actually, without the people and who they are and why they do things, that's the bit that really interests me, and that's what I'm writing about. So, I hope that it's an interesting cast of characters. It's something you do fantastically well as well, though. So, I mean, and particularly the whole budget thing, like in that is very clear in your latest book. And
real issues that I think that don't often come across in policing. But again, I'm writing about people as you are. So thinking of writing about people, we should talk about Adam Tyler. Comes from a cop family, which is not unusual. His late father was a police officer who kind of screwed him up a little bit in his head and committed suicide. We won't go. But also is an out gay man. And one of the things I really, really appreciated is the fact that it's who he is. He's not, marked by his gayness. It's not this. It's not about him being a gay man. He's a character, and he's gay. I try and do that in my own books. I've got a number of gay family members. I've got a daughter who identifies as queer, and so I try and populate my books with gay characters. And I have a trans woman in my most recent one. And it's not about, that's not what it's about. That's just who they are.
Yeah, that was definitely what I set out to do. I wasn't aware of, certainly growing up, I wasn't aware of any mysteries I was reading that had sort of central gay characters. Often if there were gay characters, they were depraved, or the killer or
Right. Yeah.
or killed off themselves, and so either victim or killer usually, and so I thought, well, I want to try and sort of balance that a bit, but I also was very aware that I didn't want to write a coming out story or someone struggling with their sexuality. And not that those stories aren't important and don't need telling, because they certainly do, but they have been done a lot. And so I felt like, well, it'd be nice to move that on a bit and let's just see someone who happens to be gay, but is doing the job. And so it kind of became more of a thing than I meant it to in Fire Watching, because the whole part of the case, without giving it too much away,
right.
Is based around the kind of idea of the main character being compromised, Adam being compromised because he slept with someone who's involved in the case.
But does that really? I mean, it seems to me that that's not. I've seen that's a classic noir. Type where it's just he happened to sleep with this gorgeous young man instead of a beautiful young woman.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. I call Oscar is in my mind the homme fatale, and he's kind of just. I was playing with that idea of that old classic noir idea, but making it more modern. But obviously that meant sort of his sexuality being part of the case. But it's never the story. And I didn't want it to be. So I've forgotten where I was going here. But Nighthawking, it's less. It's perhaps less central to the story, his sexuality, but it's always there. I always want it to be there. He's not he's not hiding. He's not pretending to be someone he's not. And I think it does come across prejudice, but I don't want that to be the main thing. But you can't ignore that prejudice does exist still in organizations.
Yeah, especially in this sort of traditionally male, I don't know what the British equivalent of good old boy would be, but blokes, blokey lad, hearty lad kind of thing.
Yeah, we call it the old boys network.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, he does run up against that, but I do think it's interesting that within, you've got within the group that you're dealing with, you have a non-traditional, if you look at that sort of thing, a non-traditional chief who is a woman, an older woman. And then, of course, Adam is partnered with Mina Rabini, who is just such a great character. I just loved her. She was a PC in the first book, and she's just gotten her first promotion. And trying to negotiate being sort of the younger partner, and then being a woman amongst a bunch of men, and also the fact that she is sort of the person who's really trying to show that she's doing the job, while other people who are running the investigation are either really concerned with other things or just sort of, sitting on their arses and not doing anything. Anyway, I love her. Where does she come from? Do you have a model for her? Or
I wish I knew, because then I'd be able to do it again. But she honestly just kind of turned up, quite fully formed. In the very early drafts of the first book, she was a very different character. In fact, she had nothing to do with the police at all. But then I realized, once I'd decided I was writing a police procedure, I realized that Tyler would need a sidekick of sorts. And I decided I wanted that to be a woman, just for the sake of balance, the kind of, the gender balance. But other than that, I hadn't really decided on anything. And I just started writing. She was an Asian woman, because there's a big population of Asians in the UK, but in Sheffield especially. So it sort of fitted with the setting. But she's first and foremost, she's a Yorkshire woman, and so I suppose she's bits of people I know, but yeah, no one model in particular. And she turned up, she just kind of took over and stole the show, and that's why she gets a bigger role in the second book. Because I couldn't help it.
I've had characters like that. Yeah, she's just she's delightful, and she makes a great foil for Adam because he can be a little dark. Not a dark person, but he's just had some crappy things that have happened to him and to his family. And she's, just sort of much lighter. She's younger and lighter. And now I really, really want to hear an audio book of this because I've been imagining her having a kind of a very light, Southeast Asian accent, but now I'm picturing her with this Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, she's very much, she's Yorkshire born and bred, so she does, in my head anyway, she has a Yorkshire accent. Yeah. But I liked the idea as well that I could show things from two different points of view. So Tyler sees things one way, and then you see the same scene through Rabani's eyes, and it's very, very different, or it gives you a different slant on things. I like to think that he's sort of teaching her some things, but equally she's teaching him things, and perhaps how to be human might be considered one of them, because I appreciate he can be difficult.
Yeah, it's an excellent balance. It's sort of younger and older, and experienced and less experienced, and personality wise they're very, very different. So I'm a big believer in you put together characters with differences and they strike off sparks, and that's what makes interesting fiction, is those sort of clashes, and not necessarily negative clashes, but those places where people's edges rub up against other people's edges.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought of this before, but what you were saying earlier about the police, that's one of the great things about an organization like the police, isn't it? You will have people come rub up against each other who maybe wouldn't have normally met in real life, or wouldn't necessarily be best friends, but I'm sure there are other professions where that happens too, but it's it's useful for that. So
it is a very leveling one. You've got men and women, you've got, in this case, you've got Muslim women and non, you see class differences, within the police, especially as you get up the hierarchy. So it is an interesting sort of organization. It's probably one of the reasons that we keep turning to them again and again for stories. So what else did I want to ask here? I've got my little list. Oh, actually, I don't even need the list to ask that. What's going on next? So Nighthawking just came out. Are you working on a third? Have you finished a third? If you finished a third, you're doing so much better than I am, because I never finished one within a year.
I wish I'd finished it. I can give you a little insight into how it's going, because you can see how empty my corkboard is at the minute. I'm giving away far too much.
Here's mine.
That's brilliant. Let's hope my publishers aren't watching, because I'm giving away too much. No, I am. I'm finding it actually a lot harder to work in lockdown than I would have expected. I do a lot of my work on a laptop in coffee shops, and having that taken away from me has been strangely difficult. But I'm not crying. I'm aware that people have had far worse lockdowns than I have. At least I have some security, so I'm certainly not complaining. But yeah, it's going slowly, but I've got a good idea of the story, and it's all plotted out. I just need to pull my finger out and write it, and it will explore the thread that starts in Firewatching and then is picked up in Nighthawking, which is what you referenced earlier regarding Tyler's family problems and family issues. So the third book kind of brings all that to a head.
Good. I like the fact, I enjoy, one of the pleasures of series to me is the fact that you can have these long story arcs that don't have to be, I mean, the individual mystery, of course, always gets resolved, but the fact that you've got these ongoing stories. So good. I'm going to look forward to that. But I agree with you. I think that, you should think that being forced to stay at home would be a boon to writers, but I have known so many people who have really struggled with producing this past year. I think part of it is just living through history, even if the only way you're absorbing it is through your computer or the newspaper or the television. There's just a lot that we're all concerned with and preoccupied with and taken up with.
Yeah, definitely. And I know lots of writers who are finding it great and are being very productive, but it just turns out not me. So
I'm glad the heck with them. We're not going to talk about those people. Those are like the people who started doing exercise during the lockdown, and they've now conversed their body. It's like I started eating large bags of chocolate during the lockdown. That was my version of it.
Yeah, I hear you on that as well.
All right, so we should probably check with John and see if there are any questions that we want to address. Oh, and there he is, appearing like magic. I can't hear you, John.
There we go. As soon as I started talking, I saw that your muted thing pop up. So I love when we pair up authors and there are all these little things that you don't think that like they have in common. Like you guys both write series where you get perspectives from different characters throughout them. I also love that you both have matching post-it walls behind you. That's amazing.
Yeah, the secret to writing success,
a drawer full of post-its.
One of my favorite author photos or pictures of an author anywhere is there's a photo of Jacqueline Suzanne who wrote Valley of the Dolls, and she's sitting on her floor in her little Poochie dress, and she's just got this big board behind her, and she's like marking like with post-its and all that too. So it makes me so happy to see that authors actually do all of that.
I think if you don't have somewhere in your house that makes it look a bit like a serial killer lives there, then you're probably not a crime writer.
Don't even get started with what your Google history looks like.
Oh. Yeah, true enough.
So since I mentioned, since you guys both do kind of books where you have kind of different character perspectives, have you ever started writing and thought, oh, like with you, Julie, have you ever started something like, oh, wait a minute, no, this wouldn't work from Russ's perspective. I have to do it from Claire's. Or with you, Russ, had done it where, oh no, Adam wouldn't do this. Maybe this needs to be for Rabini.
Well, I would say for me, actually, a lot of the work that I do feels like figuring out who is the proper perspective. Russ and I both write from a close third person. So we're not writing, I did this, I did that, but you're clearly, obviously in the head of one viewpoint character and speaking from that. And yeah, because I will do, as you saw from my little wall of post notes, I have an idea, well, there's going to be this scene and then this is going to happen. Then the other thing's going to happen. And a lot of times there's some starts and stops and figuring out, well, who is the best perspective from this? Sometimes the best perspective is you want one person to know something and not another. And sometimes the best perspective is just, who emotionally is going to be more affected by this. And I'm sorry, I'm seeing this.
That's everywhere tonight.
Yeah, mine has disappeared. I think my daughter laid out something for him. How about you, Russ? What do you feel about picking your point of view?
I totally agree. It's multiple reasons, isn't it? So you've just said sometimes as well, I'll just think, well, we've not heard from this character from a while, so it's maybe time they had a turn to keep them in the narrative. But yeah, I have rewritten whole sections and changed the point of view because it didn't work, or it didn't work for a timing reason, and it's made more sense to use the other character. The worst thing is when you want to show something that neither of them have seen, and then you've got to try and communicate that in a different way. But that's also the reason I always have a character who's not police, who you hear from, because I like to show what the other side of it, the kind of the victim side, or the people that meet the police but don't know how the police work, and so that's useful too, which I know, Julia, you do too.
Yeah, and I was saying I really love the character of Dave in Nighthawking, because we get these sort of flashes both of aspects of the crime that the police are unaware of and that we don't know about, but also just that sort of experience of coming up against someone who doesn't know what it's like, coming up against this sort of machinery that is the investigation. So it does give you a chance to shine different lights onto the same events.
Yeah, they're always very damaged characters as well. My editor says I'm good at writing about vulnerable birds, sort of damaged birds, kind of.
So we have a question from Kathy. She says, Julia, you have one of my favorite lines in a book in your first Claire and Russ book, in the Bleak Midwinter. Her question for both of you is, how much pressure is there to have a great first sentence to open your book, or if you want to extend that, a great first paragraph?
Russ, you want to take that one?
Well, it's one of the rules of writing, isn't it, that people tell you you've got to get that first sentence right. But I don't think about it. I don't think I consciously worry about it. It's probably the bit that gets rewritten most, because you're constantly going back to the start and making sure things fit for later. I don't even know what my first line is in Nighthawking.
I was just looking, and you kind of have two with Nighthawking, because you have this section that is part of a Nighthawker's journal, which is interesting because we have no idea what's going on, other than he's breaking into a garden and he discovers part of a body, which is fabulous. And then chapter 1 begins, the man with the scar on his cheek looks down at the cold steel of the railway tracks, and the morning sun glints back up at him. He wonders what it would be like to meet your end in this place, which I think is a terrific first line.
Thank you. Great. I'll take that. It's a good question. It is important, and I definitely do revisit it and try and craft it after the fact. It's never the first line I've written. But what about you, Julie?
My famous first line that Kathy is probably referencing is in my first book, which is, it was a hell of a night to throw away a baby. And it's the best first line I've ever written. I'm never going to come close to that afterwards. Nothing happens to the baby, by the way. The baby is okay. But that was originally, when I wrote it, that was the start of the second chapter. I wrote and rewrote the first chapter, which I do often with my books, and then wind up chucking it completely. I feel that writing a really boffo first line is great, but I feel it's more important to start out with the first couple of paragraphs, giving people, you want to lure them in. You're thinking of the book buyer who is standing at your local independent or at Waterstones or something, and they're opening up, they're only going to read a paragraph or two, and you want to get them, but also to give an authentic feel for the book. One of the things that drives me batty is a book that starts out in the first chapter as if it's going to be one thing, and then it turns into something completely different. It's like, just tell me honestly what you're going to be.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I've got another question from Kathy. She says, Stephen King said something to the effect that if a writer states in a book that the sunset is indescribable, then that author needs to find another job because it's the writer's job to describe it. Because as you touched on this and talking about how much research you put into a book, but she's always interested in authors who know the limit of how much description to use. So do you attribute knowing when to stop as an innate skill, as an experience, or is it just a really good editor, or all of the above?
Wow. Kathy should be teaching writing classes.
Definitely.
Really thoughtful. What I would comment for that would be, and I'm anxious to see what Russ has to say, is that a lot of times I try to leave a considerable amount of description up to the reader's head. You know, I don't describe how my characters look very much at all. And I notice you don't either, Russ. I mean, we know that Adam has a scar, and that's kind of it, you know? So, but I have a picture in my head of what he looks like, and I have a picture of what Mina looks like, and a picture of what Diane looks like. I feel that trusting the reader, giving them a few things to hook onto, and then trusting the reader for a description is the best way to go forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. Certainly in terms of characters, I deliberately didn't describe Tyler because there's always that thing, isn't there, where there's a film or a TV made and the character looks nothing like you've imagined your favorite book.
Yeah.
And sometimes just a picture on the cover or something because it's nothing like you've imagined. And I wanted the reader to be able to do that bit of the work. I think there are things you should leave for the reader to do, otherwise they get bored. So that's fine. In terms of sort of general description, I've never considered it as one of my strong points, and I usually find that the things that I agonize over it, trying to craft and make as beautiful as possible, are the things that I end up cutting because they just haven't worked. And the really nice descriptive bits I've just done by accident. So maybe there is a bit of
it's interesting. It's interesting you would say that, though, because I felt that, I mean, I thought you did the setting really well. Sheffield is a city I have not been to. I went to school in England, in London, but I've never been to Sheffield. But I felt I really got this feel for kind of the sort of gritty industrial parts and the prettier, you know, posher parts and the reclaimed historical areas. I felt you conveyed that really, really well.
Thank you. I did spend a bit more time on trying to get the setting right, because I think setting it's obviously important in any book, but in a police procedural, I mean, it's something you do brilliantly as well, Julia. Readers expect to be able to see where the characters are, and they have to be I mean, you do it with a whole town, which is just incredible. And the detail in yours is just beautiful. I think it's so rich.
I think that's something that people want from crime fiction.
Yeah.
You know, I feel crime fiction, one of the great things about it is it's really grounded in location, as opposed to what I always think of as the, you know, Atlantic Monthly literary fiction, which is somebody middle class staring out of a picture window in some undefined suburb, you know, thinking about their bad marriage.
I've written that story. Have you read it?
We've all written that story.
Yeah. The other thing with Sheffield was it's a place that, as you kind of implied, Julia, it's a place that people have heard of, but not a lot of people know that much about. And what they do know about it is what it used to be famous for, which is the cutlery and the steel trade. So I do consider Sheffield as one of the characters in my books, and I did. So yeah, I did spend. Having said I don't do description, I did spend time on doing that. I hope that vaguely answers your question, Kathy. I think you maybe you could tell us more about it.
So one of the things that you both do really well too, and you guys touched a little bit on this, with especially with a mystery series, you have the this is the case that your character is working on in this book, but then you have this character or this other arc. With Julia, with yours, it's a little bit more of a personal arc with everything that kind of Claire is dealing with, and then Russ, with yours, it's personal because it's Tyler's family, but there's also this corruption in the police department and this whole other arc. And I think you guys both kind of do those really well. So I was wondering, were those bigger arcs something that you had kind of planned out or in mind when you first started the first book, or are they things that have kind of grown organically as you've written? Let's start with you, Russ. I know you're only 2 books in or 3 now. So do you have that kind of arc, of that bigger arc, ready to go when you started book 1?
No. I mean, when I started book 1, I didn't have anything, including a clue about what I was doing. But it came. While I was writing Fire Watching, my father passed away, and I ended up putting it aside for a while and sort of working on other things. And when I came back to it, I realized he'd been ill for quite a while. I realized I was writing about fathers and sons, and I didn't really realize until that point what I'd been doing. It took a sort of break from it to realize. And so at that stage, I then realized there was a story here I wanted to explore, and it was the relationship between Tyler and his dad, and why he is the way he is. And that was the point I kind of picked. I thought, there's a bigger story here, and it's a story that I need to tell over more than 1 book. And I decided arbitrarily that it was going to be 3 books because, I don't know why really. It just seemed like a good idea. And then, so the second book develops that, and then the third book, the plan was that it gets sorted. It will get sorted, but there may be some threads left hanging as well. I have some ideas about what I want to do next and where to go next. But Julia, what about you?
Yeah, you want to leave those threads hanging. I am infamous for leaving cliffhangers at the end of my books, because you want people turning up and buying the next one. So that's good. Yeah. When I started my first book, I was hoping that I would sell a book. I wasn't thinking about a series. I wasn't thinking about it being a series. And then when I did think about a series, I thought in terms of a 5-book arc, which is now turned into 10 books. So you start out with these arcs, and then you finish one story, but then one story leads to another. Again, I would say that that's one of the pleasures of writing a series. And I think that's one of the reasons readers really love a series, is the chance to you get both the adrenaline rush maybe of having the mystery in that book, which is solved, but you also have these long, slow developing aspects of the characters, which come out book after book, and their lives change. One of the things that I try to do, and that I like to read other authors doing, is having characters who continue to change. The things that happen in the last book affect who they are. It's not, they don't get punched and then the next scene, they're fine again. And I think that just gives us a chance to develop these really interesting, deep level characters.
Yeah, that's something I would like to do as well, and certainly something I've done for the third book. The start of the third book very much is picking up where Nighthawking ends and deals with the ramifications of what's happened. So I will follow in your footsteps, Julia. And
I want to see. So I'll tell you, as a reader, I want to see some more of Mina and her family. I want to see like her starting to get pressure from her parents to get married already, because I think that would be a fantastic conflict for her. She's clearly very I'm not sure if ambitious is the right word, but she really wants to do a good job, and she really wants to show well in her, in her career. Anyway,
I'll take that
just
note.
a reader. That's what I like.
So before we head out, we've been talking about Russ's. Julia, do you want to give everybody kind of a little bit of a kind of elevator pitch on who your characters, Claire and Russ, are, and tell them a little bit about your series?
Oh, sure. Oh gosh, elevator pitches are not my strong suit. So I write a series set in the Adirondack region of upstate New York with an Episcopal priest named Claire Ferguson and the town's chief of police, who is Russ Van Alstyne. Like the name Russ a lot, Russ.
Good choice.
And 10 books in, it is both about their relationship with each other, with the town, with the police department, and with the people in her church, and also, a series of as many murders as I can get away with in a town of only 8,000 people.
And so if you get
fantastic books and so rich and vibrant and full of life, they really impress me, and I'm desperate to read more.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
And so if you guys are watching, if you at home, if you have not read Julia's series, you can start with book 1, which is In the Bleak Midwinter, or her most recent, Hid from Our Eyes. She said it's is it 9 or is it number 10?
That's 9, and I'm
9.
working on number 10.
So it's number 9. You can also jump in there. I would recommend going back to the first one just because I love the series too. But if you don't want to go all the way back 9 books, you can definitely pick up this new one. And I think you'll be okay there. With Russ, his first book was Fire Watching, which is available in paperback now, and Night Hawking has just come out Tuesday. Both authors, both series are big favorites at Murder by the Book. One of the things last year, as we had mentioned early on, once kind of everything started getting canceled, and I had this every time I would get near my computer, we would get more emails about events being canceled. One of the ones that I think hurt the most as a bookseller was Julia's, because we had gotten a new book in the series and we weren't going to get to see her. So I was so excited that we were actually able to do a virtual event then. And I'm so glad that we've been able to get the two of you guys together to chat tonight, because this has been fascinating.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thank you, Julia, for doing this. It's lovely to meet you, and
it's lovely to meet you too. This has been a lot of fun. God willing, we'll all be able to get together in real life in, if not the end of this year, then in the next.
Yeah. So before we head out, because it's really late for Russ, he has been, usually we do our events with UK authors at 1 p.m, because at that point it's like 1 for us is 7 for them. So what time is it there for you, Russ?
do I want to look? It's just gone 2 a.m.
Yeah. So we're gonna let him
night I've had in a long time.
So we're gonna let him get some sleep. But before we head out, I just wanted to reiterate that we have both books. We have the whole series of Julia's in store. We've got Russ's in store. So if you want to order those, you can either do it at murderbooks.com. You can give us a call at the store. As I said, you can come in and browse. We're happy to get some books in your hands, or we're also doing curbside pickup. So definitely please consider that. If you came into the event late, you'll be able to rewatch when we're done. Facebook will have it up immediately. Sometimes YouTube takes a little bit longer to archive them. If you want to go back and see our event with Julia from last April, it's in the YouTube channel, along with all of the other author events that we've been doing. I think we're over 200 virtual events now. So there's a wealth of things. You can also find, when you get to the YouTube channel, we have staff recommends videos. And I do believe that Brenda has a video for Fire Watching where she recommends it. And I have a video for In the Bleak Midwinter recommending it. So if you guys want quick bookseller recommendations for those are also on the YouTube channel too. So Julia and Russ, thank you so much for doing this evening. It was so great to get to catch up with you. Like you said, hopefully next time we'll actually get to do it in the store. You guys take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.